Welcome, everyone. My name is Kristen Miller-Zone, and I'm the Executive Director of Costume Society of America. We thank you for joining us for today's edition of Conversations on Dress and Oral History with CSA Fellows Vicki Berger and Sally Queen. Let me introduce our moderator, Heidi Cochran. Heidi lives at the foot of Mount Timpanogos in Orem, Utah, with most of her family, 6 cats, and a very large craft and sewing stash. She has loved the history of clothing and appearance since she was a little girl and saw Hello Dolly on PBS at her grandparents' house. Heidi has made wedding dresses, costumed and acted in local theater, been a licensed image consultant, and holds a degree in history and psychology from Utah Valley University. She currently serves as CSA's Southwestern Region Treasurer and is a co-chair with Vicki Berger for our 2023 symposium in Salt Lake City. I will turn it over to Heidi to introduce our 2 additional speakers.
Hello, everyone. We are so excited to be here today. Vicki and Sally I'm privileged to count them as friends. Sally is a native of Dallas, the big town to the east of Fort Worth, meaning Vicki and Sally both speak Texan. She graduated from University of Arizona with a degree in clothing and textiles and a minor in business. Sally joined Costume Society in 1987, served on the Southeastern Regional Board at the CSA National Board, and was selected as a fellow in 1998. She currently lives in the CSA Southwestern region in Summit County, Colorado. Sally gained a wide exposure to world cultures as the wife of an Air Force officer, including an assignment at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, and that's where this journey begins. Vicki's hometown is Fort Worth, Texas, better known as Cowtown. Residents are aware of a city to the east, but rarely visit it. Vicki earned her degrees in clothing and textiles at the University of Arizona and Florida State University, joined CSA in 1977, and became a fellow in 2012. Vicki and Roger, both retired, live in Phoenix, Arizona, and travel in Latin America as much as possible during normal times. Does anyone remember normal times? Yeah, we will turn that to Sally and Vicki to talk about their excellent costume adventures.
Sally and I are going to storytell our way all the way from the day we met on July 15th, 1989, to the future, which will be the Salt Lake City Symposium in Salt Lake City 2023. Next.
I apologize. There we go.
Okay, so let's go back to early July 1989. I was a curator and section chief at the North Carolina Museum of History in Raleigh, North Carolina. And the building that you see is our building home during the 80s on into the early 90s. And the handsome gentleman on the right side of the slide is our director, John Ellington. So we were looking forward to a new building. And of course, that means everybody on the team has to be involved in fundraising. So John called me into his office one early July day and said, you need an interactive costume project. And I'm going to give you $15,000 to do it. And the money is in place. And here's what I want. So he handed me a little piece of yellow paper that had these 5 words on it: 1770s, crinoline, bustle, 1912, and 1920s. And he said, "You're ready? You got the money? Go to it." So let's go to July 15th, 1989. That was a Saturday. And Colleen Callahan, who was at the Valentine Museum, sponsored a wonderful mini meeting. Now, at that time, the regions were identified by numbers. So we were all in the South, what is now Southeastern region, but was then Region 6. So we rounded up some friends, and Alvaro and Caroline Coronado went with us, and we spent the whole weekend in Richmond. And Caroline and Alvaro are jewelry designers, and you'll see their work later. So after Colleen's program was over, we had a time for announcements. And so I stood up and I announced that, first of all, I had $15,000 to spend. And I was looking for designers to make a standard size, I think, Sally, it was a 10 or a 12, women's outfits, skin out, all the foundations and everything. And they would be delivered in early 1990 so that I could get started on my fundraising for the North Carolina Museum of History. Well, here you can see some of the results. Now, first of all, these are the people who were there that Saturday afternoon. Sally Queen and the Colonial Williamsburg team, Pat Roth, Mary Rohr, and Liz Hopper. So by the time we got to the refreshment table, everybody was signed up and away we went. So the designers delivered these costumes in January and February of 1990. And thanks to Paige, who located this letter on the right, here is Mary Rohr with John Ellington handing over the hat to the bustle outfit. We really used this to good advantage for the new building. We went all over North Carolina. We went to Kentucky, Ohio, and South Carolina, where Jan Heaster had a workshop. So it was a great success. So that kept me busy for quite a few years.
Vicki, who knew that this was going to start on a journey? I was doing a job. I started at Colonial Williamsburg June 1st, 1987. So what you see here are a little bit of history that Colonial Williamsburg started with their costume program in 1934 by putting 4 women in period dress for a special event. As we all know, people love clothing, whether it's exhibits or whether it's a live exhibit like people. And the program continued throughout time until a big change happened as Colonial Williamsburg prepared for the bicentennial. 1976 was going to bring hundreds of thousands of people to the colonial time. And the department went to what I called a colonial uniform, seen here on the right, that had a semblance to the period by its length, but they were mass produced by Van Horn and Company in New York City. The gowns seen in the middle were still produced in-house. As you can see, a great deal of attention spent to side hoops, but not much to that basic foundation garment. So as I learned the job, I really wanted a job. I didn't know I was on a journey. I wanted to get 2 wonderful children through college. And so I learned the process, the procedure, the skills. And within a year, we had moved to a new facility. We had talked to everyone about the purpose of clothing, and it had changed over time. By 1987, a big shout out to Denny O'Toole, who was developing first-person interpretation. He wanted more accurate clothing because, you know, Thomas Jefferson can't just come out in anything when he does interpretation. So we moved to a new facility. We changed our name to the Costume Design Center. We wrote a new mission, reevaluated all the jobs, and started with our vision of Williamsburg. While we're showing women here, we really wanted to interpret throughout all of Colonial Williamsburg, from the enslaved to the royal governor to all ages. This is what we were going toward with Streets of Williamsburg. And when we presented this program, and by the time Vicki and I met, this program was in place and moving along, we had done a 180 in terms of the clothing for the interpreters. So a big shout out to any of the Costume Design Center staff that were hardworking and talented. They did a 180, and most went along with not too much grumbling. And to the CW employees who were very much, many of them very excited, we only had two groups of people. Those that were going, oh my goodness, to wow, let's do more. To the Cloney Williamsburg upper management led by Denny O'Toole, who simply said, Sally, how much, how fast? Much like Vicki's boss did. So this was part of the program and the change that you see today, which was to a more authentic look of the 18th century by the 1,200 people in period clothing at Cloney Williamsburg.
Okay, so we're moving along now. We're in the 1990s. And along with our jobs at the North Carolina Museum of History and at Colonial Williamsburg, both of us began to be more active in the volunteer work on the regional and national boards. So I'm still calling it here Region 6. So I served on the board, secretary, treasurer, and then president. And through that, because the presidents were required to attend the national board meetings, I began to serve on the national board and then was assistant treasurer and treasurer. Now that's kind of surprising because I am not a numbers person, but it only worked with all these treasurer gigs because my better half, Roger, is a statistician, and when it comes to numbers, he's a good wingman.
Yes, and Vicki and I did get to know each other better. The project where we met started and really introduced us to a lot of very talented people that helped do Vicki's project. But under the Carver model of governance and led by Kay Boyer, really who introduced it to the board, we started looking at board governance at the national level. Talk about a scary topic, but it was just the right time that things were changing within Costume Society to a more mature organization. And so Carter's model really embedded in both Vicki's head, my head, and now future generations. What good for what people at what cost? And that played itself out through pretty much the whole rest of my professional and personal career.
All right, so moving on a few years while all of these other things are going on, the new North Carolina Museum of History building opened in April of '94. Roger was up on the roof with the team that was communicating with the pilots. This is for you, Jack. We had a flyover and Roger was up on the roof talking to the pilots to make sure they came in the right order. So we opened 4 exhibitions for the grand opening. And then over the years, they just kept rolling on and on and on. And I've listed just a few that would fit on the slide. And Paige Myers, I see in the participant list, and she was very much a part of all of this.
To continue that journey, we wanted to emphasize that overarching theme of collaboration and connections. When I heard Vicki stand up and announce about her project, I said, oh, I want to know her. She sounds like me. She's my height. We can work together. And that's what happened with these 2 projects. So Felicity on the right was a wonderful opportunity to work with Pleasant Rowland and the American Girls doll series. Felicity was the 4th doll, and Pleasant had a relationship, professional relationship with Denny O'Toole as an educator. And her model really spoke to the Costume Society model as well. She wanted to teach 10-year-old girls to love and appreciate history through her books and through her dolls. And she went to Costume Society members who knew history, and they became the designers. The shout out here really is to the the curators, the Linda Baumgarten, the Claudia Kidwells, the Colleen Callahans, who opened their collections to us to make sure that we were getting the period correct. And that's the real love of those collections. So I headed the project team that designed Felicity's clothing. And again, my theme throughout is I tended to be the project director who set the budget, coordinated, saw that the project came in online. I didn't do all of it by myself. It takes collaboration. And the Thomas Jefferson coat on the left was a collaboration between the Los Angeles County Museum of History, that does have 5 Thomas Jefferson's garments, Cloney Williamsburg, and Monticello. So we were doing reproductions of Thomas Jefferson's clothing so that Monticello could have those for hands-on history. And we also made a copy at Colonial Williamsburg. So Brenda Rosso, thank you very much for getting that current image of it. But along the way, in doing a reproduction, we learned about the man, Thomas Jefferson, and his journey through life. So 2 collaborative projects, and I hope that we can inspire the younger generations to work together on very important projects. 1995, and as Vicki said, Roger was there all along. Bruce was still an active duty officer, and the Air Force thought that we should move to the Washington, D.C. area. For a museum person, wow, I couldn't think of a better environment to be in. And I chose at that point to use the experience from Cloney Williamsburg to help a different audience, and that was small museums and actually the field of reenactors, which had grown and were really hungry for information, valuable firsthand information. So I worked with Gatsby's Tavern Museum to do 10 years of symposium, as well as the one on the right is in the town of Fredericksburg. So Gretchen Boulevard on the left and the Silly Sisters, Diana Runyon and Sarah Cowan, were very much part of bringing us to Fredericksburg. And we met many, many people along the way. They're still very active in the field of museums and costume reproductions and reenactment.
Well, we opened the new building in 1994, and I can't say that the exhibit schedule slowed down, but at least we could give time to some more professional volunteer work. So along with Louise Binner and Elaine Beck, we invited Region 6 to hold the 1997 symposium in Raleigh. And so our home base was the Museum of History, and everyone was able to enjoy some of the exhibits, plenty of time for that. We had field trips. We had, listen to this for all you Southerners, we had lemonade and sugar cookies across the street at the Executive Mansion. And I want to point out the figure on the left. This is a forensic reconstruction of the Sorrowtown woman. A lot of people got into this, archaeologists, the lab technicians at Chapel Hill. Some wonderful graduate student had counted every one of these beads, little glass beads. And Roger took that information and he calculated how many beads per square inch of what color. And we shared that with our bead makers, our beaders. And then she was adorned with these wonderful bells, these like a jingle bell, wonderful bells. And Caroline and Alvaro Coronado, who are jewelry makers, made every one of these bells. And Alvaro, I see your name there in the participant list. It was quite a project. So that was 1997.
We're hopping around some of these special projects, and what we really, in choosing them, is what we worked together on and then what we worked independently on. This was a special study week at the National Museum of American History, where Claudia Kidwell and I worked together to do the special event. And it was so meaningful in the life of the Cop Gals, they named themselves, that they presented the program in 2000 at Cloney Williamsburg. What we did was study the garments, the undergarments of a 18th century family and sorted it out by genealogy. But the unique opportunity here was to bring different disciplines together for a project. And you'll see many a name on that list to do shout outs that are still active in Cloney Williamsburg. And we talk about it regularly about how strong that teamwork was with Ann Wass is still on the board. Melihoy Hayden came from the theater. We had Joyce Walker from reenactment. Kay Hayden came from genealogy. And we worked both with Claudia's collection and the cop clothing, as well as you see Doris Bowman on the left and the quilts. It was one of those life-changing opportunities. And let me just say that we got everybody involved on the fourth floor of American history by running up and down between collections and telling everybody what we found. I selected this one because it was so instrumental in many of our lives, and would encourage people to look for ways to work together to have that kind of teamwork.
All right, so we're now toward 1999, and my tenure as president of Region 6 was over, and I'm pretty sure Sally was next up as president of the region.
Yep.
So by this time, people are calling us by each other's names, and we got used to that over the 3 decades. That's okay. So I had gone to school just outside of Mexico City in the 60s, and I went to take Spanish and to learn more about Latin American culture. So that stayed with me. Plus, going to the University of Arizona, where I could travel regularly and easily in Mexico. So after my presidency was over, I remember saying this exactly to the board: I need a project to keep me out of mischief. And so I knew that Puerto Rico was a part of Region 6. And I wanted others to have the opportunity to learn about the Puerto Rican customs and the famous masks. And so I said, so I volunteer to plan a symposium in Puerto Rico. Well, there was a little pushback. You can't exactly drive to Puerto Rico. But anyway, the vote carried. And so I get started on Puerto Rico. And Sally says, ooh, I want to go to Puerto Rico. So what we did gave us a wonderful opportunity. First, of course, you have to have a site visit where you go to the locale and you have to stay in different hotels every night. Kay Boyer is really familiar with that, and she's the one who taught us how to do this. So Sally and I went on our site visit, came back, planned the rest of the meeting, and we timed this exactly because we wanted to participate in the Feast of St. James the Apostle, which is held in Louisa every year on July 25th. The second reason was for Kay King to be in heaven on earth when it comes to masks. So on the present slide, you'll see on the outside of the program this very intriguing mask. This is the mask of a vejigante costume. And this turned out to be the focus of our learning activities. And on the right, you see us in our hotel on the grand staircase. And I have to say, over to my left, as I look at the screen, was the casino. So all good hotels that have casinos, you have to walk through it, just like the Tropicana. You got to walk through it in order to get to the grand staircase. So there we are. So we have another slide here of Puerto Rico. Now, we did all the usual things. Of course, we had 2 days worth of presentations, self-guided tours around the older part of the city, went out to the fort, all of those good things that you should do when you are learning about a culture. But the grand finale was to go to the small town of Louisa and stand on the sidewalk and enjoy the procession of St. James with these wonderful vejigante costumes. And you can see one of my favorites over on the right. And the bat wing part of the costume is universal. and children, people of all ages participated. And I do know that Kay was in mask heaven that day. That day was for Kay King. We also had 2 visits to mask makers' studios, and the 3 photos on the left give you an overview of one of them. This is mask maker Don Castor Ayala, and you see his publicity poster there that was in the studio. And then he explained to us and demonstrated the making of the mask all the way from the coconut shell to the finished product. Of course, purchasing was allowed. And he is holding the mask with a beard that I wanted to buy for Roger. However, Don Castor's final decision was he was not ready to sell it. But we do have Roger and Don Castor with the bearded Vejigante. It was great. It was great.
Vicki, at the same time, you're right. I did follow you as president of Region 6, and I recall our conversation was, let's have a meeting in every section, every state of Region 6. That got us to Puerto Rico. While Vicki is very much involved in the culture, the clothing, the ethnicity of Central and South America, I focused still primarily on what I knew, which was 18th century clothing, while experiencing all the rest was great. So the Swatch Book series goes back to Carver. What good for what people at what cost? And there was a great demand by small house museums and reenactors to know. And my best story here is a woman that rushed up to me at Fort Frederick and she said, "Oh, I bought corduroy to make a pair of stays." I looked and I thought, okay, be polite. And I said, well, corduroy really was only used for men's work clothing in the 18th century. So the Swatch Book was to meet a need for that person hungry for quality information. And as you can see here, I stayed within my subject matter. These included 24 fabric samples, modern fabric, for people to make better decisions at small house museums and reenactors. And with the help of other Costume Society colleagues, which I'd gotten to know through the National Board, they authored the other 4. That shout out goes to those other people who could buy into this. And that was marketed. I self-published the first one and then published the other 3. Because of what I found, you can do special events, but to really be profitable, you need to have a product as well. So many of you might know me from this series, which I worked with Costume Society of America to really do follow that Carver governance model, was what good for what people at what cost. I'd fallen in love by then. What started out as a job did become a journey, and I really loved the people along the way. So in 1997 at Pittsburgh National Meeting, the calendar series debuted, and one colleague walked up and said, well, let me see who 12 of your favorite friends are. And you know, she was right, because Vicki is right there in February 1998. And I did go back to show appreciation. The mission here was very simple. 1 month, 1 collection, feature them, and encourage more photography, help smaller institutions learn how to mount costumes, and to give visibility. It also gave visibility to Costume Society in that partnership. And that was really the leadership at that time was Phyllis Speck, who I hope you're listening. I can't see the participants, Vicki, if Phyllis and Chet are on. They were really working with the Costume Society of America series, and the calendar eventually did become part of the series because I was bonding way too much with the UPS man, and I wanted to do more with museums. And so the calendars were then part of the Costume Society of America series under Phyllis Speck's wonderful tutelage, and then Texas Tech did the printing and the wholesale distribution, while I continued to do the development. Small museums with large museums, East Coast, West Coast, North, South, how do we tell the story of the collections that literally I and many others had fallen in love to. But the personal story is that at the very first calendar, Bruce said, yes, we can do this. And he signed over 20 years of savings bonds to fund the first calendar. And I can remember sitting them all night, signing them over so we could fund it. So this was a partnership. I was the for-profit business working with museums, the nonprofits, and with Costume Society, that nonprofit. They went for 10 years, 1998 to 2008. And guess what, Vicki, we discovered along the way? I thought when we started, oh, okay, we can do this, 20 years worth. I'm young. What we discovered, it was a 200-year project by exploring American museums. And Vicki said, I don't know, Vicki, what'd you say? Did you say I'm in? Or did you go, oh my gosh, Sally's got another project?
No, I probably said we're in because, first I want to say here, I want to give a shout out to Eric and Kent at the North Carolina Museum of History, our photographers, because not only did they take the photos for the calendars, but they've photoed everything in the past 35 years. And so they also took, if you look closely at the cover, the top left picture, the red inaugural gown of Dottie Martin, they took that shot expressly for the cover of the directory. It was great.
Yeah, thank you, Vicki. That is, we couldn't, if you haven't heard that message, it's been teamwork all along. And there are many, many people that did help us with these projects and help us succeed. Martha Davis developed the database for us to use. And at one point we had 4,000 collections in the US that had clothing, textiles, anything related. We only went to press with 2,604 that we personally verified, thanks to a volunteer effort by both Martha and Michelle Jankowiak, Vicki and her staff, as well as state representatives and Costume Society as well. This was part of the CSA series, and it debuted at Costume Society. And as many people affectionately have said, it's the yellow pages of the field, but only 2,604. And I knew that I'd gotten to my target market when I got to Summit County Historical Society, and I found the calendars, and I found the swatch books, and I found the field guide in their library. Small museums could have publicity at that point. And we do hear talk, right, Vicki, that maybe Costume Society might pick this up electronically or in a different way. But by the time we were done, we were exhausted because you had some other projects, Vicki.
Okay, so you finish one project and you just roll on and roll on and roll on. So after the directory was published, I needed another project to keep me out of trouble, and I was now retired. And I hope Brenda Brandt is here. I saw her name on the participant list earlier. So I asked Brenda if she would be my partner to invite Costume Society to Phoenix and Tempe. The hotel was in Tempe, and show off our beautiful state here in the Southwestern region. So we are a border state. So we came up with this title, Costume Crossing Borders, A Cultural Journey. And you can see on my left of the screen that Patty Annawalt, a wonderful Patty, agreed to be our keynote speaker. She autographed our books. Such a wonderful person, and we miss her so much in the Costume Society family. Now, the pictures at the bottom, I hope Edie Sanford is on the participant list. So we had the usual meetings. Kay King did a fantastic silent auction. At that time, it earned more money for Costume Society than any other silent auction had done. Edie did the marketplace. great successes. So we had, after all of that, we had a day of post trips. And about 10 or 12 of us signed up for a one-day blitz to the Grand Canyon, including Edie. And we were in 2 luxurious vans. So Roger and I are not in the same van as Edie. So unbeknownst to us, Edie talks almost everybody in her van into going on a helicopter trip. So we stop for a break and we learn about this. And at that point, some of the people in our van wanted to go on the helicopters. So we kind of switched, we scrambled, re-scrambled, and we parted ways. The more sedate of us went to the rim and walked along the rim, while the more adventurous, led by Edie, went on a helicopter tour. And these 2 photos at the bottom of this screen are Edie's, and she sent them just not, a few days ago. And Edie, thank you. And you couldn't have picked a more wonderful pilot to take care of all the ladies who were in the helicopter. Ongoing. I guess I've been taking Spanish for about 50 years, and I still can't master the subjunctive voice, but I keep trying. And throughout the time that all of this has been going on, Roger and I have been traveling in Mexico and Central America, and we sponsor a number of elders and children in both Mexico and in Central America. And in 2012, our symposium was in Atlanta, so some of you may have been there. And Kay King asked us if we would plan a study tour to Guatemala. That's what started this. So we're back to Kay King, accolades at this point. And we said, well, yeah, sure, of course. Just take along a few of our friends. So about 2013 and 14, end of 15, we started making extra trips to Guatemala to scout for locations and exhibitions and museums and experiences that would be suitable for a Costume Society audience. We made a return trip to Copan in Honduras, a return trip to Tikal in northern Guatemala, and all the time we're thinking, all right, can participants of all ages accomplish this hike? Is it too dangerous? Maybe we need ground that is flatter. What are the abilities of the people who might, physical abilities of people who might sign up for this? So we did our research. We had visited hotels all over Guatemala already, but we did more site visits, and we hooked up with Velvet Luna and Mario Soto, who are part of a travel company headquartered in Guatemala City. From then, it really took off. So in May 2018, we led a study tour of 19 people to Guatemala with a trip to Copan in Honduras to study the costume that was shown in the statues at Copan. And it was such a wonderful group, such a wonderful group. Here you see some 3 group shots. The top 2 are at the Museo Ixchel in Guatemala City, which is a premier costume and textiles museum with the most fantastic exhibitions. Please go when you are in Guatemala City. Bottom left photo, we are at Copan. Now, let me point out something. You see the banner above us, the CSA banner? We carried that thing all over Guatemala and Honduras. In Copan, they would not let us display our banner. That was very interesting, but Mario explained that this was a rule of this National Historic Site, and so we rolled it up, and it's in my backpack to be carried on to wherever we were going next. In the center, you see Mario Soto. Now, listen, folks in Dallas and Fort Worth, Mario lives in Keller, Texas. Okay, so the next time we meet in Dallas or Fort Worth, we have to invite Mario. And then over on the right, bottom right, is the group of weavers who put on a half-day program for us in a beautiful park in Santiago de Atitlan. It was 3-language translation. It went from Zutuil to Spanish to English with every single sentence and paragraph. What a learning experience it was to hear these stories in the native language of our wonderful weavers.
Talks about retirement, but we never really retire because the opportunities are there. This is Textile Camp at the Summit Historical Society, as we found the need to help the museums in this area as well as in the Southwestern region. We retired here in 2016, and thank you, Vicki, for coming and being part of it each year. And it just says that we want to celebrate collaboration and working together.
All righty, so now we're going to look ahead. And for sometimes Heidi and I have been the co-chairs of the 2021 meeting and did our site visits in 2018. And we all know what happened with the quarantine. So we have postponed until 2023. So I'm going to let Heidi tell us, give a plug for Salt Lake City 2023.
Yes, we were ready to go. We had our hotel, we had a whole spreadsheet of networking and offsite and just people to talk to and see what they could contribute. And then we had to pull the plug on this, and that was a kind of a sad day for us, but we are so grateful for our committee that remains intact, remarkably so. They've all agreed to stay on and continue planning for 2023 in Salt Lake City. We renegotiated our contract. I am very, very hopeful that the tourism economy in Utah will recover very well so that we have places to go and we have museums to visit. This is just part of our list. We are recruiting locally where we can. And our hearts and prayers are with the planners, Carmen Keist and her group in Minneapolis, St. Paul for next year. We feel for you and the pivoting and replanning you've had to do. And we want this to be successful for you so that we can be successful and continue on with our symposia because they are so valuable to our members.
Thanks, Heidi. We're toward the end, and we need to thank everybody for the past 40 years. And so I just want to say to Roger, from helping type my dissertation until going to Salt Lake City in 2023, it's been a great time, and thank you so much.
And to Bruce, the thing that explains it best, Vicki, is when Bruce gathered up all of our spouses and supporters and took them on a tour in Charleston of the harbor with my cousin Jerry, who was a tugboat captain. We could not have made this journey without their support, and both emotional, financial, and along the way, as well as forming their own support group among other supporters of Costume Society. So thank you very much for coming along on a journey.
So we want to say thanks all y'all. That's what we say down in Texas. And there's not time to read all these names, and we're going to be adding names to this for the archives, but it's been great, and thanks to everybody. And by the way, those are Guatemala fireworks New Year's Eve, which we celebrated for about 10 years. And the last one, Heidi. So this is our call to action, folks. More fireworks from Guatemala. Collaborate, network, mentor. Celebrate the journey. Thanks all.
And thank you from the day one, and thank you to Costume Society providing a network.
Yes. And we had a comment in the chat from Lisa Fernandez, who said she was in the helicopter at the Grand Canyon. And she's automatically much braver than I am. That memory comes up quite a bit, especially when we're talking national parks planning for Utah 2023. I was thrilled to find out that Sally was part of Felicity because I was a little too old for American Girl dolls, but I still loved them.
And you know, Heidi, I forgot to mention, 10,000 little girls and their families came to Colony Williamsburg when Felicity debuted.
Oh my gosh.
Pleasant's mission of supporting American museums and particularly costume collections and curators was huge. And that was a bad visitation year when that debuted. And those families made a big difference. It's a great example of a for-profit working with nonprofit and helping everyone to succeed.
Right. And I have a American Girl story, Sally, I'm going to use a moment. So I bought at the museum gift shop 3 American Girl aprons. Remember the little burgundy ones? Okay. And on one of our trips to Guatemala, we took those 3 aprons and gave them to our sponsored child, Catalina, and 2 of her friends. So there are 3 little Maya girls in Guatemala who have American Girl aprons, and they put them right on and they wore them the rest of the day.
That's just one of the ways in which the importance of the history comes alive. Paige Myers says they are adding more costumes, and they added an 1840s dress and an 1800 to 1810 dress about that time, and are looking for funding to spruce up the original dresses and add more time periods. Now the museums are going more digital. We're hoping they will get a lot of use again, and I agree with that. And
something from Alvaro.
Yeah, there's the Alvaro. He says, so glad to see some old friends and team members again. We miss you all. We're ready for a new project and product development anytime. And Alvaro is fluent in Spanish if you need help with the language.
They both are.
Mila Hoyt Hayden asks, any thought of reproducing the Swatch books again for the new generation of reenactors?
Oh, thank you, Mela. Mela was on one of the cop gals as well, which Mela's also very, very active with a really good market for me, which was for the Swatch books was Costume College in LA. And the answer is I'm semi-retired. Does that help, Mela? I'll give it over. I'll help anybody develop their own variation. I'll be happy to mentor.
There's a good graduate project right there.
Or if by chance you saved any of those original ones, I hear they're going for about $1,500 on eBay.
I have all 4.
Well, I do too, but you know, you're gonna. I only have 4, and I have 2 children. I don't know how that's going to work out, but I'm not going to worry about it. Maybe we can inspire somebody here to help Costume Society maybe take the directory digitally and do it online. Mm-hmm. We would love to see those extra 1,600 collections be added. There's a challenge out there.
That would be great. Oh, Misty Oberly Mitchell asks how you ended up in Colorado, Sally.
Started skiing here in 1983 and had a second home here starting in 2000. And that was our compromise. Dallas had gotten too big, and besides, Vicki wasn't in Fort Worth, so why be in Dallas? She had moved. I had to move out west.
Yeah, we're glad you're here.
So before we sign off, we just have a couple of minutes. I'm going to move to my left so everyone can see the tablecloth we put out for today's presentation. It's from Guatemala. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece. Let's see, where do I go? This way. There, you can see it a little bit. It's a beautiful piece and very typical of home furnishings that are still available. So I'm not kidding. When this quarantine is over, we're going back.
I'll go.
I can't tell you when. And anybody who wants to go with us, just be in contact. I guess we better start a list. And
Another one.
come early. We'll tell you where we're going to be. Come early, stay late, enjoy and learn in Latin America. That's my call to action.
Thanks so much, Vicki, Sally, and Heidi for this fascinating conversation and for all of your incredibly hard work for Costume Society of America. And we thank everyone for attending today too.